The room went silent as laughter echoed off the marble walls of the grand ballroom. At the center of it stood Ethan Parker, the quiet son of billionaire CEO Richard Parker. Ethan had just finished introducing himself to a group of powerful families, heirs, and business magnates. But instead of shaking his hand, they laughed in his face. "Is this the kid?" one of them sneered. "The so-called genius heir?" Another voice chimed in, "He doesn't even belong in this room. Look at him, awkward, timid, clueless." Phones were out, recording the moment. The humiliation spread quickly across whispers and private group chats. Ethan's face flushed, but he didn't lash out. He stood there, absorbing every cruel word, every smirk, every insult. To most of the billionaires in that room, Ethan was a nobody. He wasn't the outspoken type, he didn't flaunt wealth, and he didn't fit their idea of a future mogul. But what none of them realized was that Ethan was the sharpest mind in the Parker dynasty. He had been trained quietly, mentored in finance, technology, and strategy by his father, who believed the boy would one day outthink every arrogant family in that room. That night, Ethan walked away without saying a word. But in his mind, something clicked. The mocking had ignited a fire. If they thought he was weak, he would prove them wrong. And he would do it in a way they could never recover from. The Parker family empire was built on real innovation. Richard Parker, Ethan's father, had started as a small-town entrepreneur who rose to create one of the most powerful tech and energy conglomerates in the United States. Unlike the old money families who relied on inheritance, Richard had fought for every dollar. But over the years, rival billionaires grew jealous of his success. They formed alliances, whispered about him behind closed doors, and looked for ways to bring his company down. And now, they had mocked his son. What Ethan discovered in the following weeks changed everything. Hidden inside business reports and financial records were patterns, suspicious trades, inflated assets, and reckless borrowing, by the very families who had laughed at him. They were playing a dangerous game, propping up their billion-dollar empires with unstable deals. Their castles were built on sand, and Ethan could see the cracks forming. That he stayed up nights in his father's study, combing through data. He hacked into open-source records, traced offshore accounts, and tracked how these families moved money across shell corporations. What he found was shocking. The families weren't just corrupt. They were vulnerable. Ethan knew exposing them outright would not be enough. They were too powerful, too connected. If he wanted to destroy them, he needed to strike with precision. The opportunity came faster than he expected. At a private investors summit in New York, the same billionaires who had mocked him gathered again to show off their wealth and talk about the future of global markets. They didn't know Ethan would be there. But this time, he wasn't alone. He had allies. By quietly presenting evidence of their reckless investments to powerful regulators and hedge funds, Ethan set the stage for a financial storm. All it would take was one push, and their fragile empire would crumble. The night before the summit, Ethan sat with his father. Richard looked at him with concern. "Son, are you sure you're ready for this? These people don't play fair. They'll come after you." Ethan's eyes burned with determination. "They think I'm weak. Tomorrow, they'll know the truth." The next morning, the stage was set. Billionaires paraded around with their confidence, boasting about their $900 million empire, their private jets, their unstoppable legacies. Then Ethan stepped forward, calmly walking to the microphone. Every eye in the room turned. Some rolled. Some smirked. The whispers began again, but this time, Ethan was ready. Ethan's presentation started slowly. He spoke about market stability, investment risks, and the importance of transparency. Many billionaires tuned him out at first. But then, slide by slide, number by number, Ethan revealed what no one expected. On the big screen appeared charts showing how their companies were propped up by dangerous loans. Then came documents showing how their assets were inflated by lies. Offshore accounts. Hidden debts. Fraudulent valuations. The room went still. Phones stopped buzzing. Whispers turned into gasps, and then Ethan delivered the final blow. With a calm voice, he announced that he had already shared this information with regulators, watchdog groups, and the media. The files had been released that morning. Even as he spoke, headlines were exploding online. Exposé reveals billionaire families running on fraud, $900M fortune built on lies, collapse imminent in elite circles. Within minutes, stock prices tied to their companies began to plummet. Screens in the back of the room showed live market feeds. Red numbers flashed everywhere. Billion-dollar empires were evaporating in real time. One billionaire jumped up, shouting, "This is slander. You'll pay for this." But his voice cracked as his phone buzzed with alerts. His company's stock was already down 35%. Another tried to storm off the stage, but cameras followed her, catching every second of her panic. Ethan stood tall. For the first time, he wasn't the timid kid they mocked. He was the storm that ended their legacy. In less than an hour, the families who had mocked him saw their empire collapse. Banks pulled funding. Partners cut ties. Investigators swarmed. By the end of the week, lawsuits piled up, assets were frozen, and reputations were destroyed. The Parker family, however, rose higher than ever. Richard publicly praised his son, calling him the future of our company. For investors and allies watching, Ethan wasn't just a successor. He was the man who brought down corruption at the highest level. The families tried to fight back, but the damage was done. The mocking videos that once embarrassed Ethan became symbols of poetic justice. Side by side with the footage of their downfall, they painted a clear picture. Arrogance had been punished, and the underestimated kid had won. Months later, Ethan walked into another investors' summit. The same crowd that once mocked him now stood when he entered. Silence filled the room, but it wasn't mocking silence this time. It was respect. Ethan didn't gloat. He didn't smile. He simply walked to the microphone and began speaking, calm and steady, because he knew that in business, respect isn't demanded. It's earned. And he had earned it the hard way. The empire that mocked him had fallen in seconds. But his own future had only just begun.